very warm welcome to all of you who are in this session today. A very warm welcome from IMT Ghaziabad. So this is Dr. Shailaja Agarwal. I chair the program, the PGDM program for working executives. And I have with me two of my very senior and very esteemed colleagues, Professor Elkana Ezekiel and Dr. Professor Jishnu Changodkar. I'm sorry, I always pronounce your surname wrong, so I'll just keep it to Professor Jishnu. So Professor Jishnu. And I'm very happy to share with you that collectively these two of my colleagues bring an experience of around 60 years, approximately, rather 65 years, approximately 55 years in the industry and then 10 years in academia.
Sounds terrible.
That's not terrible, that's wonderful. So let me give a brief description of Professor Elkana and Professor Jishnu. Of course, it will not be complete because the experience is way too much to handle. Having said that, so prior to joining IMT Ghaziabad in 2017, Professor Elkana worked in the industry for the FMCG sector and in the companies like Colgate, Palmolive, Parle, Johnson, Samsung, Zydus, and the list goes on. So he's been into multiple product categories, including food, personal care, oral care, feminine hygiene, all of that. And he's worked and lived in India and also in Singapore, handling brands in the Asia Pacific region. Professor Jishnu, again, a very seasoned experience, joined IMT Ghaziabad in 2017, had approximately 25 years of work experience in the industry prior to joining IMT Ghaziabad. And he's also worked in the FMCG sector all this while, healthcare industry, FMCG sector. He's a management consultant also by profession, apart from being a professor with IMT Ghaziabad. A graduate of NIT Calicut and IIM Kolkata. He's also worked in companies like Johnson & Johnson, Samsung, Zydus Wellness across multiple countries in the Asia and in the USA. Both of them teach a very, very popular marketing courses at IMT Ghaziabad and amongst the most celebrated professors at IMT Ghaziabad. They would be talking about brand today and brand management primarily. And since both of them have been handling brand for all their lives in their corporate career, so they have culled out a few lessons that they have learned about brand management, which they will be sharing with you today. So thank you again, professors, and a very warm welcome to this session. And I invite you to please open the discussion now. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much, Dr. Shailaja. It's good to be here, and it's also interesting that it's a very inopportune time because it's a Sunday afternoon. I think, on a Sunday afternoon, it's a leisurely lunch, it's a glass of beer, it's a siesta, but obviously there are people out there who have taken the time and the trouble and the energy to, log in and listen to us. So we're just going to keep this conversational and chat about what we've been through, and it shouldn't sound like we've been through some traumatic experience. It's actually been great fun. We've enjoyed ourselves a lot, and we continue to have fun at the expense of our students and at the expense of the people who interact with us. But this is basically just us telling you a little bit about what we've done in our careers and some of the things that we learned, some lessons that came to us, a few good ones and maybe even a few not so good ones. So let me start by just a quick introduction, moving to the next slide. So I studied at Accelera Jamshedpur. I graduated in 1987. And over the course of 28 years, I worked in several FMCG companies, including Colgate, where I was in sales, an experience I've never forgotten. And I spent about 4 years in Parle Products working on biscuits and confectionery brands. I'll talk a little bit about that experience later in this session. I worked in Johnson & Johnson for 16 years, which was my longest stint. and had the good fortune and the privilege to work on almost all the consumer brands and worked in both India and Singapore on Asia Pacific projects. And my last full-time assignment was with Zydus Wellness as managing director. Before and subsequently, I migrated into a career in academics and independent brand and business consulting. And that's what we do. I've been with IMT Ghaziabad for 6 years. I teach some of the core and elective courses. And my fellow panelist, Professor Jishnu, has been an associate and a colleague for many years. In fact, to be precise, from 1994, which was when I joined J&J. And I'll hand over to him to tell you a little bit about himself. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And like Professor Elkanah said, it is a Sunday afternoon. It's time for, family relaxing. So thank you very much for making the time. Again, very briefly about myself. I am, like Professor Shalja said, a graduate of NIT and IIM and all that. I too worked for a fairly long time in the industry. The bulk of my career was spent, about 16 years was spent in Johnson & Johnson. I worked briefly for Samsung. My last role was in Zydus Wellness. Since 2017, I've moved into consulting and academics. I am an adjunct professor in IMT Ghaziabad, and I do teach as a visiting faculty in some other institutes. Like Professor Elkanah, I've had a lot of experience primarily in the FMCG sector, but also in healthcare, OTC, etc. And hopefully some of what we have done in our careers you'll find interesting and will help you in whatever you want to do. So moving on, let's start talking about brand management. So you're all familiar with Spider-Man. And here I'm showing Spider-Man upside down. There's this very famous quotation from Spider-Man that everyone knows, even if you've watched or not watched the movie, which says that with great power comes great responsibility. Now, why am I showing this? And why am I showing Spider-Man upside down? Because in brand management, it's actually the opposite. You have tremendous responsibility, but you really have no power at all. Okay. So now, is this good or is this bad is totally up to you. You may react like this guy here and say, this is too frustrating for me, I can't handle it. Or you may really thrive in this. Okay. But that is the role. And for both Professor Elkanah and me, I think that is what we really liked because it allows you to develop your skills. It allows you to do a lot of stuff. And the sense of achievement that you get when you have achieved, when you've done something, despite no one really reporting to you, despite no one, you not having any authority over anyone, that's a big high. Just to give you a very small example, we work with the advertising agencies, right, in marketing, and we pay them. So theoretically, they should listen to us, right? But the problem is they don't. I mean, they need not listen to you. You need to earn their respect. You need to earn their liking, etc., etc. Only then will they listen to you. So just because the agency is the agency of the company doesn't really mean that, they report to you. And especially when you're a fresh or a young brand manager and you have really, really senior people from the industry, the big brand names, Piyush Pandey, etc. You as a young person need to talk to them, need to get them to listen to you. That's a huge challenge. And it's a big joy when you get someone senior who agrees with you, listens to you, and you can work together well. Okay. Similarly, the people in sales all tend to be, when you're a fresh MBA graduate or even 4 to 5 years, people in sales all tend to be senior to you, older than you, more experienced than you. And if you have a small brand, how do you convince them to focus on it? Because they really don't need to sell your brand to do their targets, right? Sales is all about getting your targets done. So they can sell the bigger brands and do the targets. How do you get them to share, start even focusing on your brand? And there's a story I'll talk about later on about this. Okay. So what are the challenges of a brand manager? Like I said, responsibility without authority. You really don't have too much control on execution because, for example, if you want your brand to be distributed in 1 lakh outlets and visible in 30,000 outlets, you're not going to do that yourself, right? It's your sales team, it's a merchandising team, etc., who does that. So you need to ensure that the execution quality is excellent because that's what you'll be held accountable for, but you really do not do it yourself. You talk to the salespeople, they'll give you one reason why business is not doing well or doing well. You talk to the marketing people, they'll give you one more reason. You talk to the finance guys, they'll give you a third reason. So you get a lot of opinions, a lot of conflicting data that comes from different sources. You, as the owner of the brand, as the champion of the brand, you have to know the brand better than anyone else. You'll have to make sense of all this data, put it together, see what's right, what's wrong, and then take decisions. So that itself is a challenge. There is always conflict. Sales and marketing are always, fighting with each other. Finance fights with everyone else. And you, as the head of the brand, you need to resolve those conflicts, else your work will not get done. So, for example, if quality control and research and development have a conflict because the QA guys are not passing a product that the R&D guy thinks is the right quality, and that's your brand, and there's a launch coming in a week's time. Now you have to jump in and resolve the conflict because the chances are both the two departments, both the people are right in their place. So what is the right business decision? And then how do you convince either R&D or QA that what you're saying is what should be done eventually? And finally, because no one reports to you, you do need to get everyone motivated. Okay, you need to get everyone energized, else your work will not be done. So if you look at what you need to become a good brand manager, these are critical. It's a creative role. It's not a role where you go 9 to 5 to office every day doing the same things, right? You have to create your own work. If you have to take the brand or your business to a different level, you have to find ways to do it. And if you're not a self-starter, if you're not creative, if you're not into problem solving, if you're happy to with things as they are, you're not fit or you're not suitable in terms of personality to be a brand manager. Second, you need technical skills. And that's what your MBA will do for you, right? Your MBA and your experience, that you need to know your consumers, your customers inside out. You need to know how to develop a brand, how to handle a brand, how to create advertising, how to price your product, etc., etc. And of course, you need to know your product inside out. No one else should know your product better than you do, and your competition's products as well. And finally, this is critical, that how do you influence? Remember, responsibility without authority. So things like soft power, how do other people listen to you? How do you energize them? How do you make them enthusiastic about what you're trying to do? How do you reward and recognize someone when you are a individual contributor, you're a young brand manager? There's no one reporting to you, but that doesn't mean you cannot reward and recognize, right? Someone doing a good job in sales, in research and development, etc. Nothing is preventing you from, acknowledging that person's good work in public, in front of that person's boss, etc. So learning to develop your influence is very, very critical, and that is what will make you successful. Okay, so this is what a brand manager needs. And just to give you one small story, the first brand I had to launch was a really, really small brand, and the person who was in charge of manufacturing for the brand was a very senior person, 6 months away from retirement. I was this fresh young MBA, and in Johnson & Johnson, we were the first batch of management trainees. So the first time I went to him and we had to launch the brand is in about 6-7 months, he just looked right through me, picked up the phone, called up my boss and said, this guy's sitting here, should I listen to him or not? Okay, now, eventually it was such a joy when about 8 months later, we actually launched the brand, and this person who was about to retire, he was like, okay, what should we do next? Extremely enthusiastic. Now, you as a young 20-something-year-old getting that 60-year-old person to work together with him, aligning, getting him excited, I mean, that's a joy. And that is part of why we really enjoy brand management. Okay, so handing over to Professor Elkana, he'll talk about what he liked about brand management.
Yeah, in fact, I'm just reflecting. I'm just reflecting on the conversation that's taking place so far, and I'm a little worried that some of you might think it's a terrible job, and in some ways, it is a terrible job. But it's also great fun. There's a lot of unexpected challenges. There's a lot to do, and the amount of work you can do is entirely up to you. So if you choose to cruise along, then things will move at a normal pace. But if you infuse the brand and the company and the teams and the business with your enthusiasm and your energy, then it can make for excellent work content. There are unlimited opportunities to learn and contribute, and the more projects and areas you get involved with, the more fun you will have, the more you'll learn and the more you'll contribute. And nothing is really off limits because the limits are only in your mind. I think, in my own experience, whether it was as a young brand manager or as the head of marketing, I always had colleagues who were willing to include me in the discussion, um, on the premise that I would have something to contribute, or I might have some interesting questions to ask, and I might sometimes bring an outside perspective. And I think, just to reflect on something which Jishnu said earlier, these influencing skills and this re- res- sorry responsibility without authority is probably why brand management becomes a great training ground for general managers. And truth be told, it's never a dull, it's never a dull day, and you'll have unlimited number of challenges, which makes it exciting and thrilling. And people have often asked me, if you hadn't done marketing and you had not spent so many years in brand management, what would you have done? And frankly, I'm unable to answer that. I don't think I would have found anything so much fun and so exciting, and it's been a pure thrill. Okay, now I'm going to narrate a little bit of my own personal experience, and this concept of MBWA, Jishnu can just click one more time through, was something which first popped up in the management world when a book called In Search of Excellence was released by two authors, Peters and Waterman. And by MBWA, they meant management by walking around. Now, let me tell you why this made sense to me and what my personal experience was. I was about 23 or 24 years old. I was in my second job and I got an offer from Parle Products, the manufacturers of biscuits and confectionery, based in Bombay, to join them as a product executive. And what was unusual about that offer was that I was going to be based in the factory. And the way the company operated was they had a huge manufacturing unit in Bombay City, and all the functions, whether it was R&D or it was finance or it was sales or marketing, we all sat in the factory. We all shared the same office space, and as a result of that proximity, we all got to work very closely together. And I got to learn a lot about many of the different functions which, if I had not been in the factory, possibly I wouldn't have been exposed to. Now, the reason why I'm talking about MBWA is because there was a colleague of mine who had been there for a year and a half, another young brand manager. And what I observed was he was never at his desk. And it took me a few weeks to figure out what he was up to. Turns out that he was always on the move inside the factory, going from desk to desk, department to department, key manager to key manager, and moving things along, building relationships, getting to learn what was happening, keeping himself abreast of the goings on of the business. And if you wrote, I mean, today we write email. In those days, there was no email, there were inter-office memos. If you wrote an inter-office memo, it would land up in somebody's in tray. Then today we got in boxes in electronic mail, but they were in trays, and it would stay there for maybe a week or 10 days before anything moved. And what I learned how to do based on mirroring the experience of my senior colleague was to build relationships, move things along, and I covered a lot of miles or kilometers every day inside the factory. But that's what got a lot more work done. And today, when I talk to young brand managers or young executives, I always say that you have the opportunity to write an email, but if you can pick up the phone and talk, it'll be better. And if you can land up in person, that'll possibly be the most effective. And we've seen this happen in company after company, in relationship after relationship, where that personal contact um, can be invaluable, and it can make the difference between things getting done and things just bouncing from one desk to another. So that's my story on MBWA, or management by walking around.
Okay, so moving on to a story from my career, I think, as you go through your career, things will change. like Professor Elkanah said, when we started our careers, computers had 20 MB hard disk space, and that there were no computers initially. When they started, that was about what we had. And today you carry a mobile phone, which is in gigabytes, right? So things have changed dramatically. Um, you never touched a computer while growing up. Today, you cannot live without a computer. Okay, the world has changed, apps, etc., etc. Now, as the world changes, you do need to change along with it. So for me, one of the things was that I had a brilliant time in Johnson & Johnson. I was very, very comfortable there. And after having spent about 15 odd years there, I realized that as I was, I was looking for a faster growth, etc. I was interviewing with other people, with other companies. And I realized that the big concern that many companies had is there's this perception about Johnson & Johnson being a big multinational, very structured, very formal. They said, would you be able to adapt and do well in a different environment? Now, luckily for me, the next job I got, it was in a US MNC, but it was a startup in India. I was heading their India operations. And it allowed me to test myself. Can I really operate without the structure, without the luxury, without the the power of a big brand behind me? So I had to be involved in everything from negotiating with a landlord for the rent of the office, to recruiting people, to sacking people, to recruiting distributors, every single thing. And unlike in the past, when from a Johnson & Johnson, when you go to the market, you visit a distributor, you visit a shop, there's a lot of respect you get, not necessarily due to you as a person, but because of the company behind you. Now, when you do not have a big name company behind you, you have to earn that respect all over again from zero, right? Huge learning. It was an amazing time. I did that for about 2.5 years. And I think it gave me a lot of confidence that, yes, I can operate in very different environments. And that adaptability tells me that, I'll do well. Eventually, it doesn't matter what the circumstances are. I think I'll be able to do pretty well, adapt myself, learn what is needed to be done, and actually go ahead and do what is needed. So that was one big lesson for me. Okay. The second thing, again, from my early days, is what do you do with what you get is more important than what you get. So this is again a very old story. When I joined Johnson & Johnson as a management trainee, due to whatever reason, my fellow colleagues got brands like this, brands that you've heard of, the other management trainees, big, big brands. Band-Aid, one of my friends had, another was working on the baby care products, another was working on Stay Free. What did I get? Something that you've never heard of. And something that was actually, frankly, embarrassing for a young boy, which is actually a breast care cream. And this was an unknown brand, more medical than consumer, and the budget was pathetic. There was practically no money on it. It was very frustrating for me, because I was obviously jealous of my colleagues and my friends and my batchmates who were getting these big, big brands to do it. But then what choice did I have? So I just put my head down and started working on the brand. And because I did not have the luxury of budgets, luxury of advertising, etc., I had to really slog. I went, sat in the factory, met the R&D guys, met the operation. I ended up actually knowing the brand inside out. And while the brand was very small, the work that I was doing started getting noticed. Now, one of the big joys for me was, the sales team would never look at this brand. It was so small that they need not even sell the brand in order to do their targets. Now, I had, with my limited budget, I said, okay, my biggest driver is the sales team. If I can get them to even think about my brand, my sales will go up. So I created, stupid stuff, things like notepads which was branded with my brand, with some funny slogan under it. Every month I'd send them these pads. Remember, this was the day before mobiles. So the salespeople used to take a small pad, they put in a top pocket to write down notes. That was my brand. I sent them pens. I sent out circulars every month saying this guy has actually doesn't do sales. And I knew that I had succeeded when 6 months later, I was sitting in a sales team meeting in South India when a person stands up and says, there's a shortage of this brand. Now, for a brand that they didn't even care about, to come and say there's a shortage, that told me that, yes, it's working. Now, what was the positive of all this? Obviously, when you do good work, you get noticed. So they realized that probably I was being underutilized in a small brand. So as and when opportunities started coming up, for example, my colleague was handling Band-Aid, he quit the company. they gave it to me, right? After some time, there's an OTC business that we're planning to launch. I got that. So I started getting brilliant opportunities, really exciting work, mainly because of the work I did on this unknown brand. So the big lesson for me has been that, and this is something that as a young person, you'll always feel that if you do get frustrated, it is self-destructive. You can get frustrated, but if you allow the frustration to affect your work, in a way, it's, what do you call it? It's self-reinforcing. They'll look at you at a small brand. They'll think you're not good. If the work you're doing on the small brand is also not good, you sort of get, wished away saying this guy's a bad guy. But if you take whatever you have, do your best in it, it can lead to really big things. So that for me was a huge lesson that I think, do the best with what you have, show your best efforts everywhere, and you'll probably end up doing well.
In fact, before we get into this, I just want to add that I was in the company when Jishnu was assigned this brand. And, it was his passion and his enthusiasm which made him stand out. And under ordinary circumstances, and I think we were all guilty of laughing at him and teasing him and making fun of his the brand which he was assigned to, but he never let any of that get him down, and he just kept working away. And in fact, compared to many of the other people who are assigned to bigger brands, some of the work he did was truly interesting and innovative. And what shone through was the passion and the enthusiasm. And I think, like he said, the lesson is you won't always get served or be assigned to the most important business for the company. But whatever business you are assigned, that's the most important business for your career. And what you do with that assignment will eventually materially impact whatever happens to you next. And as you can see in his case, wonderful things have happened to him over the years, and that continues. Now, this story which we've got here is about Anacin, which was a brand that I was managing when I worked for Jeffrey Manners. Anacin at that time, incidentally, I don't think the brand is available or as prominent as it was then in today's day and age, but it was the market leader in the analgesic and cold tablet market. And it was number one, way ahead of Vicks Action 500. Legacy brand, huge business, massive rural base. The company had in fact pioneered rural marketing using van promotions and so on. But fundamentally, it was a small company, and overall, the business size might have been at that time, out of a total division turnover of about 40 crores, the total Anacin business would have been 25 crores. And as often happens when you have a relatively small top line, you never get as much money as you need to spend behind all the different initiatives. And we did the best we could. But one of the interesting things that happened along the way was that one of my teammates, a young product executive, was reporting to me. He was poring over all the media data, and in those days, we used to get huge, thick booklets of data capturing all the, the viewership numbers of the different channels and the programs. And he noticed that Doordarshan had recently started an afternoon an afternoon module which was ideally suited to a lot of Indian women who did not work and who spent most of their time at home. So typically after finishing all the housework and having lunch, they would have free time or me time as it's called. And Doordarshan constructed this afternoon segment, which was targeting these consumers who were incidentally consumers and influencers for the Anacin brand. And because the rest of the industry had not discovered the afternoon slot, thanks to the thanks to the alertness of my teammate, we as a company committed a fair amount of resources to this particular media slot, and we almost dominated that slot till other big companies discovered it, and we had a huge successful run, and that proved to be a major driver of the growth in that period of time. So I think the lesson is that we talk about survival of the fittest. I think sometimes it's survival of the smartest, because even if you're a small little frog in a swamp filled with elephants, you can think intelligently and make the most of what you have. and find your way out and be clever. So you don't necessarily need a cannon to win a war. You can win it with a pistol or with as David beat Goliath with a slingshot. So this was a good lesson that we learned, and in the succeeding years, whenever I was working on brands where the budget was short, and either I would feel the pressure or my teammates would complain that they didn't have enough budgets, I would remind myself of this Anderson story, and then we would find innovative things to do. So that's based on a personal experience.
Okay. This, I think, we all end up, if you think of a typical career, let's say you join a job early 20s, mid 20s, you struggle for a few years. Then as you get into your 30s, you would have settled down well in whatever role you have. You become good at your job, and you start delivering good results. So you sort of get into what we call a comfort zone, right? Now, that's not a bad thing at all. And a lot of people have done pretty well by sticking to their comfort zone, by doing things they're already good at. Because obviously, when you're doing something that you're good at, the results will also be good. I think, however, there's a lot to be said for not getting comfortable. There's a lot to be said for getting out of your comfort zone. Again, a personal story. This is where I was. Okay, I had the opportunity to work in the US at our global headquarters. Typical American lifestyle, first world country. I was getting paid well. I had a company had taken care of everything, house, car, etc., etc. So I was very comfortable. I was doing a marketing role, something I was already good at, and potentially a long-term career there. When this ex-boss of mine called up from India, saying, there is, and the India company was going through a crisis. We had not met our target for 1.5 years. So, and the primary issue was in the sales organization, sales structure. So he said, there is this regional sales manager position open in India. Would you like to come back? He also scared me by saying, look, we've done lousily. You can come back, but I'm warning you that, there's a high risk proposition. If we don't do well, you and I may not, and he said about himself as well, we may not even be in the company 6 months down the line if we cannot turn it around. So obviously, comfort of this versus what do I get in return? And I really thank my stars that I took what seems to be, an unreasonable risk. And I came back to this. So I came back to India. I was appointed as the regional sales manager of North India. Had to visit, places like this, all comforts away. I didn't have a car. I was traveling by auto all over the place, local buses, etc., etc. And frankly, that was the best thing that could have happened to me, because these about 3 years I spent in North as a sales head. Again, the earlier example I told you about, same thing here, that moving from an MNC to a startup. This was almost like that. Now, if you guys, most of you don't know me, obviously, but my personality is, I'm from Northeast India, from a very small town. I'm very soft-spoken, etc., etc. North is perceptually the diametric opposite, right? Aggressive people, speak loudly, action-oriented. So to come and head a team that is full of people like that in an area that I was not familiar with, it was a big challenge. It pushed me way, way out of my comfort zone. And like I said, the business was bad. So anything that could have been bad was already bad. After that, when we did brilliantly well in those 2-3 years, my zone actually got the best zone award 2 years out of the 3. We got a lot of other awards. The feeling that you get at the end of it, the confidence that you get that, yes, I can handle anything, that's amazing. And that actually put me in the fast track from a Johnson & Johnson career, because this allowed me to move into a very good role in marketing. The work I did in marketing put me into an international role, so on and so forth. So it was the trigger for, a step up, a big jump in my career. If I had not taken the risk, probably I would have still done well, but I would have learned less. I would have been exposed to less things. And I think this was really, really good. Obviously, it was risky, but this was a risk totally worth taking.
In fact, there's one thing I want to actually add to what Jishnu said, and that is this whole business of whether you should specialize in marketing and whether you need to go through sales. And we find a lot of young students asking us these questions. And I think Jishnu is a good example of somebody who has spent perhaps roughly equal time in sales and in marketing, and has benefited from the experience on both sides of the line. So, marketing is usually associated with the longer term, the strategic, the more, you know, um, brand equity and so on. And sales is more nitty gritty, touring, transactions, hard work, collections, and it's very, almost like you're on a treadmill every minute of every day, and every month you have to deliver, and every week you have to deliver. So that puts a lot of pressure. It's not that marketing people don't have pressure, but just to be clear, when if a company doesn't achieve results, usually it's the salesperson who gets called in first, and the marketing person is then called in second. So sales tends to be very high pressure, and a lot of young students and young executives question the worth and the value, and they often wonder whether their career plans to become CEOs and heads of marketing will be derailed or will be distracted if they move to sales. And nothing can be further from the truth, because eventually the best general managers in companies across the world are those who have spent time in both sales and marketing, and possibly in other functions, because that's what general management is all about. It's about getting exposure to the working of different departments, so that when you move into that GM or MD position, you are able to add value to experts uh, who actually know more than you, but because you've learned about their roles and about their work, you can actually make a difference, and you can be in a good position to command their respect and direct the resources. So I think that is what the true value of spending time in different functions, particularly in sales and marketing, is, and Jishnu is a good example of that.
Yeah. So to add to what he said, if you must have studied at some point in time, as you go up in your career, at the initial stage of your career, your tech skills are really important, right? But there's a graph saying that higher you go, the less important your tech skills become, the more important your people skills become. And if you want to develop good people skills compared to sales and marketing, I would always say sales. Yeah? And especially in India, because if you look at marketing teams in India, they tend to be of a very similar profile, typically an MBA, you know,
Yeah.
so from reasonably good business school, etc., etc. So those are probably people like you, people that you're comfortable with. So you know how they think, you know how they work. So handling them is not such a big deal. When you get into sales, you'll have to deal with a distributor salesman who's a class 10 fail. You'll have to be a distributor, 65-year-old person who's been in the business for 30, 35 years. You'll have to deal with your salespeople, who are, some of them may be veterans, 30, 40 years in the game. Some of them may be fresh MBAs. So the sort of learnings you get, the variety of people you need to deal with, the variety of problems that you'll face, the amount of conflict you'll face, it just teaches you people skills much, much better than I think any other function would. And therefore, as you go up the ladder and you get into a position where you need to handle people, I think someone with sales experience would be significantly better at handling people compared to someone who's only worked in marketing, right? And of course, to add to Professor Elkana's point, any company, when they look for a general manager or they look for a managing director, uh, the more functions that you have had exposure to, the better is your credibility. So if you have yourself and a fellow colleague, and you have only worked in one function all your life, and your colleague has done sales and marketing both, or maybe even finance or HR, because he knows multiple functions, he knows how multiple functions work, and presumably he will know how to handle, like he said, uh, experts in those functions better than you would, because you would be out of your depth when someone talks about finance or operations or something. Okay, so I think it's a good thing for you to go through multiple functions, at least two functions. If you're in sales and marketing, both I think are essential. Anyway, so coming back to the point, and when I came back to India, I was the head of North. Like I said, my personality does not suit what is perceived to be, the game in the North. Aggressive salespeople. Salespeople tend to be aggressive. Not salespeople tend to be even more aggressive. Now, how do I get to work well with such people, right? Personality mismatch, etc., etc. So first, I think strengths and weakness. Let me address my weakness first. I came into sales with 3 months of sales experience. So I was put in as a regional sales manager. And before that, I had just done 3 months of sales as a management trainee. So when I met my team, and this was a crisis period, things are not happening. I did a one-day meeting with my team where I stood up and told them I do not know anything. Acknowledging that upfront, because when someone comes in from marketing into sales, the perception is here is this guy from marketing. Typically, marketing people are seen to be arrogant, sitting in AC rooms, making strategies, no connection to reality. And therefore, they were expecting, and then he will come and give gyan to you, despite not knowing anything. So I think one good thing for me was I stood up and acknowledged, look, guys, I do not know sales. Every single one of you know more sales than I do. However, here is how I can help. I will learn from you, and hopefully over the next few years, if I'm able to contribute technically in sales, that'll be a big achievement for me. But I will try to solve your problems. I'll try to help you in whatever you need to do. I think that helped me a lot. The second thing, playing to your strengths. If you think about, let me take an example. If you think about the great cricketers in India, someone like a Sachin Tendulkar, a Kapil Dev, a Dhoni, I mean, they had lots of strengths, right? All-round strengths, and they did extremely well. My favorite example of someone who played to his strengths despite not being a great cricketer is Ravi Shastri. If you look at his record, he has got an exemplary record. But if you watched him playing, he had, I'm not a very good person as far as cricket is concerned, but he had limited strengths. Used to hit his shots only in a few areas of the ground, but he played to the strengths. If he was not good at something, he would not attempt it. And look at the success he first garnered as a player, and then amazingly successful partnership with Kohli when India became the #1 test team, #1 one-day team in the world. So he's been amazingly successful despite having, in my opinion, limited strengths, simply by playing to his strengths. So if you are, like, for example, me, I cannot, I'm not clever enough to second guess people, what they might be doing, put in a strategy in place. So my strength was being straightforward, being honest, being upfront. And that's what I did. So if I'm straightforward, honest, and upfront to a level of X, I became X plus something when I was handling sales, because that is the game. If I play, I will do better. Those are my strengths. I'm leveraging on my strengths. I'm not trying to become better at something that I'm not good at, and that actually helped me. Just to give you a small example, I had an area manager, amazing guy, great people manager. He was not very good at data, and me coming from an MBA background and being very comfortable looking at data, I was pushing him, kept on pushing him. You need to do your data analysis better. Till one day, it struck me that why the hell am I doing that? Why am I not asking him to simply do what he's already good at and get better and better at it? And there's a saying that, whatever you focus on expands. So if you look at a pie chart, and if your strengths are 70%, your weaknesses are 30%. If I focus on your weakness, yes, I can reduce the weakness a bit. But too much focus on that will make you probably stressed out, make you worried. Like this manager of mine, he was actually stressed out because I was forcing him to look at data. When I let him be and I said, look, use data the way you want to, but focus on what you're good at, he really prospered. So I think that's an important lesson for yourself and for the people that you'll work with. If you can focus on what you're good at, you'll probably do much, much better compared to focusing on things that you could be better at. This is not to say you should not improve. You should. But if you want to do well, make sure your efforts are on things you can do well, because that is what is going to give you the quicker results while you improve on the things that you may not be so good at. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just one thing before I move forward, which is, Jishnu and me have been talking about a lot of our experiences, and I think all of you in the audience who are listening to us, you all need to pick and choose what works for you and what doesn't. These are experiences that we had. These are the outcomes that we got from various decisions and actions we took. Some of what we said will work for you, some of what we said may not work, and you need to be smart and think it through and apply what is relevant and meaningful given your stage in your career, your personality, the business you're on, and the company you're working for. Okay, so we talked a lot about career building and how to manage teams and people, and what sales and brand management mean for you at a professional level, and also the impact it can have personally. We're just going to move into a slightly different section, which is some of the actual marketing lessons that we learned from the brands that we managed. And this is a story about the Johnson& Johnson feminine hygiene business, which was in a way, J&J was the pioneer of that business. Over the years, the company sort of lost its way, and Procter and Gamble came in and built a very large and successful business. And there was a lot of pressure on the J&J Sanpro business. One of the growth drivers that had been identified was the large number of Indian women who don't use branded products because they find them to be expensive. And eventually, the company decided to launch a product in a variant of the Stay Free brand, which was targeting these consumers at an affordable price. Now, the part of the story that I want to talk about is about the choice of brand name. There was a group of people within the company who felt that the name of the brand should be Stay Free Economy. And the logic was compelling and simple, which is that there are, economically challenged customers who are price conscious and who are looking for value for money products. And therefore, by saying economy, you're telling the story without too much of time spent, and it can be easy and intuitive. And there was another group of us who felt that if your customer or your consumer is economically challenged and doesn't have money, you don't talk down to them. You make them feel better about whatever offering you're giving them and whatever brand you are proposing that they consider. And we felt that by using the word economy, we would be labeling the consumer. And we elected instead to use the name Stay Free Secure, which was more about the benefits and the advantages that the product would bring to the consumer. What we had done when we first launched this product was to prominently display on the pack the price of 20 rupees for a pack of 10, which clearly told the story that this is an affordable product. But at the same time, we never used the word affordability or cheap or economy. And that made a material difference to the way the brand was viewed. It made consumers feel significantly better about themselves, about parting with their money and exercising the choice. And it also contributed a lot over the long term to strengthening the Stay Free brand per se, because there were other variants under the Stay Free name. And I think this was an important lesson we learned. And even today, when we talk about value for money brands, this lesson still resonates with me and with many of the teams I work with, which is don't talk down to your consumer, treat them with respect, and offer them value. Don't tell them that they are poor or they are badly off, and that you've designed something which is for the middle class or for the poor. Make them feel good about themselves, because eventually brands are supposed to perform at both a functional and emotional level, and this is an important part of how you make the customer feel, and the positive frame of mind that you create. So this was a big story. Incidentally, this brand proved to be the turning point for the J&J business in India. And from whatever I know, I haven't worked in the company for a long time, but from whatever I know, it's still a very large part of the business and continues to be healthy and profitable. So that's a story from way back when. Okay.
Okay, sometimes, a big thing about marketing is about understanding your consumers, understanding dynamics. So here's a story, personal story about how, you know, how do you do well in a baby business? Obviously by targeting mothers, right? This is a story about how we turned around a baby business by not targeting mothers. So this is about when I moved to Indonesia. I was the marketing director there. And unlike most countries in the world, Indonesia is a unique place for Johnson & Johnson because the baby business of Johnson & Johnson is not the market leader or was not the market leader in Indonesia. There's a brand called Cousins, a UK-based brand that was the market leader. So after going there, this was a big task that my boss had said, we do need to turn around the business. And I went around with my team talking to mothers all over the country. And it's a huge country, multiple islands, lots and lots of research. We spoke to lots and lots of mothers. Then we figured out one thing, and I'm sure if those of you who have seen babies in your families or among your relatives, you'd have seen that whenever a baby is born, what happens? You get tons and tons of gifts, right? Everyone visiting the house brings a gift for the baby, and typically the gift is something like what you see on the screen here, a gift set, which has multiple products. Now, what we realize is that once the baby is born, the mother is in the house, and these products are lying at home. Why would you not use the products, right? So what happens? The mother starts off by opening, whatever is the nearest gift pack she has, obviously provided she's heard of the brand. And remember, you're talking about babies, extremely high priority, right, for all of us. Extremely sensitive skin, a newborn baby, 1 or 2 days old. So what the mother does, she, let's say, uses a baby oil on the baby. Let's say it's from brand X. Now, if there is no negative reaction, the baby does not burst into allergies, she will not change the brand ever, right? Because for a very sensitive baby, she has realized that this oil works for the baby. No negative reaction. So she will continue with that brand till the time, maybe for the next 2 years, till the time she uses a baby oil on the baby. Okay. So while trying to figure out how to turn around the business, we came up with this insight saying, we need to get our gift sets, the Johnson's and Johnson's gift sets, into the households. We did have a couple of gift sets, but when you look at how people were buying gift sets and giving them, our competitor, Cousins especially, they had many more gift sets than us, and people typically bought Cousins. Now, who buys, if you look at the gift set, my target audience is not the mother, right? Because who's going to buy the gift set? The mother is at home. It is her friends, her relatives, probably a lot of males, cousins, uncles, etc., grandparents who are buying the gift set. So I needed to understand the mindset of the gift giver rather than the mindset of the mother. So what does a gift giver, when you give a gift, imagine you giving a gift to someone important, a good friend, a close relative. The gift you give says a lot about you and your relationship with that person. You'll not, for example, if it's an important person in your life, you'll not give something cheap, right? You'll probably give something expensive. You'll give something that shows that you've thought about it. It's a caring gift. You understand that person, you're giving something that suits them, right? So when we looked at gift givers, one thing we realized is if the gift is attractive, then the gift giver is happier giving it, because if I give a bad looking gift, the mother is not going to be happy. Okay. But if I give a very good looking gift, then the mother will feel, oh, this is a lovely gift. This person really cares for me. The person feels by giving a good looking gift, I am, giving a good message. I'm enhancing or maintaining my prestige, etc., etc. Now, the gift sets that Johnson & Johnson had in the market, frankly, were not very good looking at that point in time. We had two sets using those really tired, generalizations, that we had a pink set for girls and a blue set for boys. And our gift sets were far inferior in terms of looks to what Cousins had. So what we did, we scoured around and we discovered some gift sets from, in fact, ironically enough, from London, from UK, that were part of the Johnson & Johnson portfolio that looked really, really brilliant. And they had amazing, totally different colors, yellows and oranges and pinks and greens. So we actually launched those gift sets, and that was the start of the turnaround, because these gift sets were so attractive that people started buying them. As more and more gift sets got into people's houses, the mothers started using Johnson's baby products instead of Cousins products. And our sales of the gift set category, all our gift sets, went up by 60-70% year after year. And in a year and a half or so, we regained the #1 spot in modern trade. That was a big achievement for us. So this was for me a big lesson, saying sometimes you need to approach the problem from a side angle rather than from a direct angle. And instead of spending a lot of money launching new products, spending on advertising, simply by bringing in good looking gift packs through an understanding of the dynamics in the market, we were able to turn around the business. Okay, so next is about staying relevant over the course of a long career. I'll hand over to Professor Elkana. I think you're muted.
Yeah. So actually, there are just two things I want to talk about. We've spent a great deal of time talking about careers and how to, grow in the job. And I'm going to spend a little less time on that and more about talk about how brands can remain relevant. And I think the guiding principle is that the tools and technologies of marketing keep changing. So about 30 to 40 to 50 years back, newspapers, radio, outdoor hoardings, those were the most commonly used media for advertising and promoting brands. And along the way, television came to India. Then the television, from one Doordarshan channel, it moved into multiple channels. Then eventually, the cable TV revolution happened. Today, we've got set-top boxes, and we've got OTT platforms, and we have the internet, which is a whole beast by itself. So the tools have changed over time, and the weapons that marketers use to communicate with consumers and to beat competition are not the same as they were maybe 20 or 30 years back. But the rules of business have remained the same, which is those brands which have um, stayed contemporary, delivered value, reflected to consumers what exactly they are looking for, and delivered great value. Those are the brands that have lived through the times, and the others who've been more insular and inward looking and who failed to keep abreast of the changes that keep happening around them, they've fallen by the wayside. So the principles of marketing have remained the same, but the tools and the technologies of the game have changed. And so you need to learn how to play the digital game. You need to learn how to play the OTT game. But you need to remember that your customer is essentially somebody like you and me, for whom value is important and for whom there has to be a good reason to switch from some other brand to your brand. And if you don't continue to meet their requirements and delight them, then they will eventually walk away from you and move to some other business or brand. So that's just what we've noticed. There are many brands which have disappeared over time, and there are others which appear to be as youthful and vibrant as they were when they were first launched. I often do this exercise in the classroom where I put up the names of some brands, and they are actually maybe 75 years old, 100 years old, 125 years old, but they are still as healthy and vibrant and youthful as they were when they began. And there are others who haven't kept in tune with the times and who totally evaporated or disappeared. I won't mention names, but I'm sure that each of you has your own list of brands that have continued to grow and prosper, and those which are no longer with us. So we've already talked about careers, and I'll allow Professor Jishnu to move to the next topic.
Yeah. Okay, great. Just one brand I can name. Professor Elkana did not name any names. Think of Coca-Cola. It's a 150-year-old brand. I'm sure most of you drink Coke, even when you're teenagers. It still is a cool brand. How do you remain cool after 150 years? How do you not be branded as the brand my grandfather used to drink? I think that's what he's talking about. They do things well, the fundamentals very strongly, remain relevant, be very consistent, and regardless of the age of the brand, it remains a young, cool, dynamic brand, right? Okay, which brings us to the last part. One of the joys of uh, being in marketing, being a brand manager, is creating stuff, material, advertising, etc., that you really enjoy creating yourself, people like, and they give great business results. So we'll end with two such examples from the Johnson's Baby business. And both these examples, Elkana and I worked together on them, along obviously with other people in the brand team. With Low Lintas was our agency with um,
Some
uh,
great people.
yeah, there's an agency called Flirting Vision that makes movies. They made both these ads. So some amazing work. And it gave us a lot of pleasure because this work was appreciated by the industry. We enjoyed making it, and it gave great business results. Okay, so the first example is Johnson's Baby Cream. We wanted to position it as the perfect moisturizing cream for a baby's skin. Baby skin, for those of you who don't know, up to the age of, I think, 3 or 4 months, it's 3 times thinner than adult skin. Very sensitive. It can get dry much easier. So we wanted to make this a really great moisturizing cream, or to tell people that this is a great moisturizing cream. This is what, in marketing, have something called the positioning statement, as what does the brand, what does this product stand for? And I'll not read the entire thing, but if you read it, it says it will help to keep the baby skin perfectly moisturized. And how does it do it? So we had talked to our R&D people to look at the formulation, and we discovered that this cream formulation has, I think, 7 different ingredients, some of which pull in moisture from the skin. They're called humectants. If there's moisture in the air, it actually sucks in the moisture under the skin, and the others prevent moisture from going away from the skin. So these ingredients together are actually keeping the skin moisturized. And when we talked to the agency, multiple discussions, we said the device that we're looking for is a moisture lock that keeps the moisture in the skin, keeps your skin soft and supple. Now, this is where, some of you may have worked in advertising, may want to get into advertising. This is where magic happens. How do you take something like a moisture lock? Not a bad story, but if you can imagine what sort of ad will come out of it, it'll be a very technical ad. You have a product window, ingredients mixing together, forming a seal, locking onto the screen, to the skin, etc., etc. Agency did some amazing work. They took this concept and created this. So see how much you like this. पर्दे में रहने दो पर्दा न उठाओ पर्दा जो उठ गया तो मॉइस्चर उड़ जाएगा ग्लिसरीन और विटामिन ई युक्त जॉनसन्स बेबी क्रीम जो स्किन पर चढ़ाए मॉइस्चर का पर्दा और उसे रखे बेबी सॉफ्ट मामा को भी चाहिए मॉइस्चर का पर्दा जॉनसन्स बेबी क्रीम स्किन रखे बेबी सॉफ्ट. So you see, taking this concept of moisture lock into moisture ka parda, bringing in that song, which is very familiar to all of us, and this ad and the next ad will show you. I think these are the best ROI ads probably in the industry, among the best, because they were run for at least 8 to 10 years and they still give business results. Okay. So the next one, and this is the last one, and then we will be open to sort of answering questions, etc. Again, Johnson's baby oil. Now, baby oil in India is used for massaging, right? And there is a belief that if you want your baby's bones and limbs and muscles to develop well, you need to massage them. So our objective was, how do we connect Johnson's baby oil to the high points of a baby's life? Because that will give a very strong emotional connect to the mother. And we said, can we show a baby taking her first steps and oil playing a role in that? So this became our challenge. We took this challenge, very difficult challenge, that we need to, okay, now the issue here is, if you take a baby who's already walked and you shoot an ad using the baby and you claim here's the first steps of the baby, no one's going to believe you. At least mothers will not believe you, right? Mothers know babies. You cannot cheat a mother and say that the baby is walking for the first time, because the baby has a confident walk once the baby has walked for some time. The first time around, the baby is actually figuring it out. The baby is going to fall down. It'll be very wobbly. So when we took this challenge of showing the actual first steps of a baby, it was a very difficult thing to do. So we found this baby, very cute looking baby, who had not yet walked, but was due to. We were all expecting that in the next 1 week, 2 weeks, the baby will start walking. We booked a day for shooting the ad, hoping that the baby would have walked. No, baby did not walk. We postponed the date. We postponed it again. Eventually, we came to a situation where we said, okay, we can't wait anymore. We are losing money. Let's take a backup baby. Someone who's walked recently, will not get the first steps, but can't help it. We have to run a business. On that day of the ad shooting, we had tied up with the other baby. This mother calls us up saying, this morning, my baby took 3 steps. And immediately we called her in, we called the baby in. And what you will see in the ad is actually the longest walk that baby had made in her life during the shoot. Okay. And when you see the steps, we're not faking, we know it's real. And that ad again has done wonderfully well. They ran this execution for probably 10 years plus. Then they had further executions which took the same story to other babies. I'm not sure how well they did it, but this was extremely successful for us. Okay, and here is the ad.
इसकी देखभाल का पहला कदम जॉनसन्स बेबी ऑयल, विटामिन ई के गुणों से युक्त, इतना सौम्य कि इसे रोजाना इस्तेमाल कर सकते हैं। जॉनसन्स बेबी ऑयल, सौम्यता भरी देखभाल।
So as you can see, that's really a baby wobbling away. Now, the beauty is these ads, they were recognized in the international Johnson and Johnson fraternity. In India, brand equity, they have these things about ad best ads. They came there and they give amazing business results. Both baby cream and baby oil, they delivered amazing growth after year. Yeah. So that is it from our side. Thank you all very much for your time. And then we're open to questions. I assume that will come through the chat box. So we're ready for that.
Yeah, thank you so much for having joined us on a Sunday afternoon. And we have a little bit of time, so we'll be happy to answer any questions that any of you might have. It's been fun reflecting and walking down memory lane. Brought back a lot of good memories. And those two ads which Professor Jishnu showed were really, I think, for us, the high point of our stay with the company.
Okay, so the first question, maybe
How
Elkana,
could we define a target audience?
Mhm.
So I think that's a slightly technical question. There are many different potential customer segments out there for any product or service, and typically, if the product has already been developed, then you need to find a segment to whom that product would be most acceptable. But if you follow traditional marketing thinking and the marketing concept, the way it has been articulated by experts, you should start with a segment of consumers, understand what they're looking for, and then design products or services to meet their requirements. Clearly, the segment that you pick up or target or focus on will be one which will be large enough to make your business uh, viable in the long term, and you should be in a position to feasibly develop the products which they're looking for. So it's a combination of making sure that you design something which people want and sell it at a price which people are willing to pay. And that the sheer number of consumers out there has to be large enough to make it meaningful for the company, and the product has to meet the expectations of customers. So that's the only way I can describe that. Vishnu, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, if I can add to it, many a time, you have a product, you have started your business. Okay. You have a product you want to sell. Now you need to find out for whom that product is most important, right? So for example, if you look at a lotion, everyone can use a lotion, from a young kid to a 60, 70 plus year old person. So you need to first find out which of these audiences are dissatisfied with, whatever they use a lotion for. Are old people, for example, not getting lotions that keep their skin well moisturized, etc.? Can your lotion solve that problem? So understanding these consumer segments, you might come and say, look, while my lotion can be used by everyone, it is among the older people where there is a dissatisfaction level they have with current lotions. And I think my product is good enough to solve that. That could be one way of also figuring out which target audience to go after, even if you have something ready. Not in the traditional way of marketing, where I would have first gone and surveyed everyone, found out their needs, and then developed a product. So I think that is one example of trying to figure out. Another, just to add to it, if you think of a brand like Clean and Clear, they make face washes, they make all skincare products, but they focus only on teenagers. Again, the brand, when it started, they said, look, here is the segment who faces certain problems. Now, skincare is a very competitive market, but there were not enough brands talking only to teenagers because, teenagers don't have money, right? The size of the pie is going to be small. They have to buy you out of the pocket money. This brand says, I will focus only on teenagers, which means I'm saying no to selling to people who actually have money. But among teenagers, I'll be the number one brand. And they've been very successful, right? So in this case, you also looked at the competition. look at the size of the opportunity, looked at how difficult or easy it is, how many brands are already there, and then you decided here is the segment I want to get into. So that could be another addition to that.
There's one more question just come saying, can we measure the impression or a brand's impression of the company? I'm not very sure if I know what this question is all about, but let me see if I can interpret it for you. I think if you're asking me, how does a company judge or determine the impact that a brand is having on customers or consumers, there are many sophisticated research techniques, and there are many brand equity models which will tell you how consumers view your brand, how they perceive your offering, and how it compares with what other brands are with 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 the impression or the goodwill or the associations that other brands have. Because eventually a brand doesn't operate in isolation, it operates in a competitive set. And so typically if you've defined your competition as, let's say, 3 or 4 other brands, you would want to compare and see how you stack up in relation to them. And usually what happens is, if you've done a good job, then there will be some attributes or some dimensions or some associations which uniquely belong to you, or which you own to a greater extent than other brands which are competing for the attention of the same consumer. And like I said earlier, there are equity models, there are research models which will help you to understand this in depth. Many of these models are diagnostic, but they're not prescriptive in the sense that they will tell you where the problem lies or where your strengths lie. The what you do with that information as a marketer or a business team is entirely up to your skill and your experience, because you might have all the information and all the equity studies, but if you don't know what to do with it and what decisions to take arising out of it, then it's of little use. So that's where the skill and the talent and the experience of marketing teams and business teams comes in. But there are many techniques and many models which will give you a good reading of where you stand with your customer and in relation to your competition. Krishna, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I was trying to answer. I'm trying to answer the next question, which is, I think, related,
Okay.
which is about what is brand equity. Professor Alkana just now mentioned brand equity models. Okay, they all give you an overall picture of the equity of a brand. Now, it's a good question. What exactly is brand equity? Technically, the simplest definition of brand equity is what is the extra you would pay for the brand versus for another brand or versus the same product. Let me give an example. If you're to go to a shop to buy a toothpaste and the shopkeeper gives you an unbranded toothpaste, maybe it's a Thai or a Chinese brand, you've not heard the name before. And let's say the price of the toothpaste is 20 rupees. Next to it, there's a Colgate toothpaste line. Okay, and for the same size, let's say it's a 20 gram or 30 gram, whatever the size may be, the Colgate costs 30 rupees. I'm sure most of us would end up buying Colgate instead of buying this unknown brand. So you're willing to pay a 50% premium for Colgate versus an unknown brand or versus a generic product. And that is a measure of the brand equity of Colgate. Okay, that is the practical way of looking at equity. There are technical definitions. The most common definition says that brand equity is a set of assets linked to a brand's name. So for example, what are the assets? The awareness of the brand. Some brands like Colgate, like Lifebuoy have huge awareness. That's an asset. What is the next asset? Loyalty. Some brands have a large segment of their customers who are very loyal. Recently, there was news about iPhone globally. 90% iPhone customers say the next phone they're going to buy is also going to be an iPhone. So loyalty is huge, because the more loyal customers you have, the less money you need to spend. You don't need to market to them all the time. You just need to give them good product, etc., good service. So your marketing expenses actually become less if you have a large base of loyal customers. Third is what we call perceived quality. The stronger brands, when you think of them, they have very high quality. Think of Japanese brands versus Chinese brands, right? As of today, think of a Japanese brand, impression is that it's a high quality brand, and Chinese brands have an impression of not being really that good in quality. And finally, we have what we call brand associations. What do you connect with the brand? When you think of the brand, think of Dettol, you think of germ kill. Think of Maggie, you think of a mother, you think of hostel life, you think of taste. What are those associations? Think of Apple, you think of Steve Jobs, right? What are those associations that are unique to the brand? Now, all of these combined are the equity of the brand. I hope that has answered the question. Elkan, if you want to add anything to it.
No, I think you've captured it well. In fact, that's a pretty good description of the construct of equity. In fact, linked to that is the next question, which is somebody has said, it's believed that brand management is a closely knitted concept for B2C. How can we use some of these concepts for building B2B brands? And in fact, in many of the lectures which I give, I often give the example from B2B of companies who make capital equipment and earth moving equipment, and Caterpillar is the best example of that. So obviously, there are many earth moving equipment manufacturers globally, but Caterpillar is the brand for which a huge premium will be paid because of the equity of it being a reliable, trustworthy brand with a solid service backing, and they give guarantees about the speed with which they will replace a machine which has broken down, and they actually deliver against these expectations and these promises. And there's a famous statement from the B2B marketing world, which is that no purchase manager ever got fired for giving the order to IBM. Now, IBM used to be a hardware company at one time. It's morphed over the years into a service provider and a provider of IT services. But the trust and the goodwill and the faith that people have in the IBM name is what makes the difference between whether to give the order to perhaps another company who is offering services or products at 15 or 20% discount. And if the purchase manager opts for IBM, he knows that there's a lot of faith and trust, confidence. And that's what that's exactly how, based on these two examples of IBM and Caterpillar, the concept of brand equity still remains applicable. So the confidence with which you buy a daily use toothpaste or shampoo or shaving cream is reflected in the confidence with which procurement departments will place orders on well-known companies rather than on lesser-known companies with whom there might be a greater risk. And there's always the fear of the unknown. So you would prefer to work with a partner or a brand which is one you can trust.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, the principles are the same, whether you're selling
Right.
to B2B companies or to consumers, because what are the principles? Your brand needs to stand for something. So Caterpillar stands for great quality, Tata stands for trust. And as you're managing the brand, it is your duty to build on that, whatever you stand for, and not harm it, right? Your duty is also, there's a very common knowledge that if you over discount a brand, if you keep on giving offers, you actually reduce the brand equity, because then people are waiting to buy your brand only when a discount is given, right? Same principle applies for B2B. If you're selling your brand, you need to have enough confidence and not keep on discounting it to get orders, because eventually what's going to happen is your customers will only place an order with you when you give a discount, which is going to spoil the brand. So I think the fundamental principles remain the same. The type of customer is different. The media that you use is different. The role of advertising is probably much more significant in a B2C context compared to a B2B context. Your people who meet the consumer, meet the customer, are much more important in B2B compared to B2C. But the basic principles, I think, remain the same. I hope that has answered that question.
I don't see too many other questions. I think we've answered most of what we've got.
Yeah.
Somebody has made a comment saying, thank you for a wonderful session. Well, I just want to say thank you for joining us on a Sunday afternoon. And we've enjoyed ourselves. And I hope we get other opportunities to talk to all of you. If there are no other questions, we can close the session. And
Yes, sir, there are no more questions. So
okay, ma'am. So then I think it's
thank you.
thank you very
everyone.
much, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Good day.